7 million people showing up, all of which are paid protesters, obviously, in order to protest what's going on in the Trump White House is a net positive as far as I'm concerned. Unfortunately, while the protests were going on, our government was letting us down, and especially letting me down. If you haven't heard the promo that ran for the better part of 72 hours, which a good friend of mine even informed me that it was a gutsy move, putting in the promo that I expected the shutdown to end by the time that I was chatting with you guys on Monday. If you haven't been following along, and I don't blame you if you took the weekend off, we were very close to putting this government shutdown behind us. The longest shutdown, partial shutdown, I should say, the longest shutdown in American history is currently what we are embroiled in right now. And when we talk about having a clear-cut ask during protests, I'd argue I'm not 100% sure why the shutdown is happening in either direction. I'm just going to be frank. Unfortunately, if you guys are unaware, the Senate passed a continuing resolution to keep the government open, I believe, for 8 more weeks, so we could have this bleeping conversation again in May. I was informed of that moments after I got off the air, and I was like, oh, well, cold day in hell. The House GOP doesn't have a suicide wish. They're going to pass this, and we're going to put this behind us, and it's going to come down to whether or not Donald Trump decides that he is going to sign it into law or not. You imagine my surprise for me to come home from the station Friday afternoon, only to find out that House Speaker Mike Johnson is plastered all over my social media feed. He is all over mainstream networks, going out there trying to blame the Democratic Party for not putting the resolution forward, even though he has the control to do that. We are at the point where I am happy to acknowledge that both sides were acting like infants at times during this shutdown. That is an unavoidable truth. What is also an unavoidable truth is that in the Senate, there was a bipartisan effort to put this behind us. And for the record, Trump did sign an executive order to get the TSA agents paid. So it's about time. But probably should start there going forward during shutdowns. Just going to throw that out there. But the House GOP decided they do not want to go forward with this. And even after they killed it, even some Republican senators that voted no said that it went too far. For the record, what going too far means, according to Oklahoma Senator James Langford, is that part of the qualifications for getting this across the finish line is that the masked Virgin Army was not allowed to be at polling places in November. You know, basic ask for a lot of people that are stressed out about whether or not Donald Trump is going to play by the rules come November, because quite literally every single poll that's out there spells a bit of a disaster for the GOP by the end of 2026, barring some kind of huge turnaround in the way that they are governing. And given the fact that Axios is reporting as of today that the GOP is weighing cuts to our health care in the name of funding the Iran war for an extra $200 billion. I don't foresee that polling data changing anytime between now and November. So that was part of the deal breakers in the eyes of the GOP right now, is that the masked virgins were not allowed to show up at polling places as per what was included in this new resolution. Something that the majority of Americans would like to see happen, given the fact that MAGA cannot point to any examples of immigrant-based voter fraud taking place in this country over the course of the last 40 years. If you've got that evidence, I'd love to see it. Waka waka, MAGA, you don't have that evidence. So the House GOP decided to keep the government shutdown going, which is what we are dealing with right now. Still no end in sight, although TSA is expecting to get paid. Whether or not it's going to be a matter of continuing payment or what's going to come as a result of that, only time will tell. But we are sitting here now still embroiled in this shutdown that, by all accounts, was set to end Friday. Some of us predicted that it would be over by Monday, and gosh dang it, it should be over today. And unfortunately, one party in particular has decided that it's not time for this to end yet. I'm at a loss for words to a certain extent here, guys. I'm going to be real with you. I don't know what these people want, because what the Democrats are asking for is absolutely neutered. In terms of changes for ICE, immigration reform, it's just a basic call for decency, a little bit of accountability. I've been rewatching Breaking Bad. The whole show's available on Netflix. And you know what's crazy? The DEA agents trying to crack down on the cartel aren't wearing masks. Maybe we could put that into some form of legislation, that we don't want a mass Gestapo running around raining hell on all of us. Crazy thought, I know. And yet here we are, March 30th, pushing 2 months. Excuse me, not quite. Month and a half, started on Valentine's Day. Month and a half of government shutdown for reasons that aren't particularly egregious. I'd argue the shutdown that took place in December made much more sense than anything that's happening right now. We don't have adults in charge. And to a lot of people listening, that's not news. But to people that have been trying to play catch up, for people that are trying to excuse away some of this behavior, there's been no effort to actually reach some kind of compromise here. Mike Johnson went in front of microphones, straight up blocked what the Senate did, and said this is the fault of Democrats. And I already know there's people that are going to believe it. I am not providing cover for what the Democratic Party is or what they've tried to accomplish. But the fact remains, where we are today, the fact that there is not a reopened government today, is exclusively at the hands of the GOP. And I see in the Wisconsin races that are coming up here over the course of the next week and a half or so here, you're seeing these cries for balance, for consistency. The new GOP talking point is that voting for Maria Lazar does not give conservatives control of the court. It just makes it a more balanced court. As if that would be crossing their minds at all if the opportunity were available to make it 5-2. Conservative, that is. The decisions being made in Washington today, for right or wrong, and I'll allow you guys to determine whether or not you think it's right or wrong, but the decisions being made on the national level today are going to impact Wisconsin's elections on Tuesday. They just are. And you're not going to be able to talk yourself out of this one, because this was embarrassing. It's embarrassing for me for predicting it was over in the promo, which, lesson learned. But more importantly, it's embarrassing for the GOP. There was something across the finish lines, and more importantly, there was something that, as somebody on the left, I have no idea what, outside of the ICE agents not being welcomed at polling places, I'd be hard pressed to find something beneficial that came out of this shutdown from a left leaning position. I'm just being honest with you. We still have funding going to ICE, record level funding going to ICE. DHS is still funded. They still are masked. They still have questionable training requirements. All of that still existed. There's no reason, outside of you do intend to raise hell at polling places, that the Republicans should have for not passing this legislation. And I defy somebody to tell me something that would make sense otherwise. 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. Karen says, so based on the news break, we're promoting more alcohol on the streets to our kids, but let's face it, I apologize, Karen. I didn't hear that. Sometimes it's white noise to me when that stuff's happening. We've got one here from Grant. If Trump can wave a magic wand to pay TSA agents, why didn't he do it weeks ago? That was kind of my attitude as well, and that realistically is going to be my attitude going forward. We got to put an end to using working class Americans as political pawns to get an agenda across a finish line. Even an objectively good agenda, like maybe the masked virgins should be held accountable for some of the things that they do. I think is a valid reason to do things, but targeting somebody making $55,000 a year, making sure that our planes are working. There we go. Questionable decision to say the very least. Let's see here. Jerry says, according to Tony Weed's last email, the fact that the House didn't get on board with the Senate bill is all the Democrats' fault. Of course it is. And of course, Jerry, the people who receive those emails are almost certainly going to buy into it, because what room do we have for logic in this crazy, messed up world that we have here? But a bipartisan piece of legislation made it through the Senate. The House GOP refused to bring it up for a vote, and as a result, we do not have anything moving forward today. I hate the Democratic Party. You've got no leg to stand on here in regards to whose fault it is that we are in this position right now. DSL says no kings or any protests with no real purpose is a joke. I see 7 million people with more free time on their hands than most who could donate their time or goods to food bank, clothing drives, or shelters. They choose virtue signaling, narcissism, and nihilism over their community and making a real difference. At least set up a donation bin at every rally instead of just attending a rage party. I mean, I'd argue a rage party would be the one where the chants are hang Mike Pence more so than what was going on over the course of Saturday. I am with you that I don't think anything is going to change as a result of this, and that as much as the Republican Party is a joke these days, if Democrats don't get their act together and offer something outside of, boy, doesn't Trump suck, they could be in for a rude awakening in 2028. Not in 2026. It's going to be a proverbial bloodbath for the GOP in 2026. But on a one candidate basis for president, entirely different conversation. And I agree with you from that perspective. But I'm not going to paint with a broad brush, DSL, and assume that the people who are at those protests aren't also doing the things that you list there. No way for me to know one way or another. And realistically, I'd be willing to bet if you are engaged enough to show up to these kind of things, you're probably engaged enough to know what's going on in the world of fundraisers and community organizing and things of that nature. We've got our first call of the day here. We'll get that on. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, I hate to be the one that always leads us into here, but I'm breathing a little easier today because I'm going to go at this kind of with the idea that you can't predict anything. So you just over the fact that they didn't get funded because there is no way that you can bet on anything now. But my big question is, did everybody leave for spring break?
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody left for spring break. Now, aren't we on the precipice of having like the biggest blowout in the world for a war?
Yeah, we got a lot of blowouts en route, but yeah, your point is well received.
So they're not worried at all about what is going to possibly happen, that they may have to stay here and maybe push back a little bit on what's going to happen. That's my biggest fear.
Brian, perhaps you didn't hear, but trans athletes aren't allowed to participate in the Olympics anymore. So I think you can put your fears to bed. We've got good people in charge. So I think you can calm down.
I watched a George Carlin bit where he says, I just don't care anymore. I'm just watching the circus happen and enjoying what's going to happen. The world will be around after we're gone, and just take a deep breath and enjoy the show. And I guess that's how I'm going to go about it now, because nothing makes sense anymore.
I'm right there with you, man, and I appreciate the call. And there's an extra layer of frustration to Brian's point, because a percentage of the population would be quiet even if no one came back, until, of course, it were Democrats in control, and then nobody came back. And it's enough to drive you mad. And that clip that he was talking about with George Carlin, I think raises a lot of points. And I may have said this on the air, but I'll tell the story very quickly here. Um, when my first speaking gig on the air, I did high school football post game analysis in Butler County and Beaver County in Western PA, and I asked one of the people who worked at the other station I was at, "What advice do you have for somebody who's just about to get into this?" And his response was, "You no longer care about the outcome." Now, I wasn't the biggest high school sports fan to begin with, so I didn't really care about the outcome even before I got the job. But, like, let's say for sake of argument, it was about the Steelers or the Packers. You no longer care about wins and losses. You care about the best story. And whatever the best story is, that's what you pull for. You no longer are watching as a partial observer. You are an impartial observer. Approach it from that perspective. The George Carlin clip that Brian references there kind of takes the exact same attitude from a stand-up comedy perspective. And Carlin states that he finds that his career, his delivery of stand-up improved once he no longer took an active interest in the outcome of the politics that he was talking about. He just viewed it as somebody who had enough money to get by, that by and large was going to survive whatever kind of calamity was coming his way, and he was just going to provide commentary along the way. I don't know if I have that gene in me to not have an active interest in the outcome of the things that we talk about, but I'm also like 20, 25 years younger than George Carlin was when he said that. So come and find me after 25 more years of banging my head against this wall. And speaking of banging my head against this wall, let's get into the duopoly on the other side of the break. There's an economist out there because, far be it for me, it's easy to get lost in the masked virgins murdering Americans in the street and our Defense Department murdering people in fishermen's boats off the coast of Venezuela. A never-ending war starting, and pardon after pardon after pardon for convicted fraud people, all because they gave the president $1 million bribe before they got pardoned. It's very easy to get distracted from the classic old school outside the box principles that we used to get into here. I want to do one of those classic segments on the other side of the break. Corporate greed. It's been around, it'll be around until we decide no more. I gotta love when professional economists are saying the things that we've been saying on this show for the last 4 years. We're going to jump into this conversation about profits, about corporations, and why so many Americans feel like they are struggling to get by right now. Let me just tell you, some of the statistics we're about to dive into are unparalleled since 1929, and I see no significance about that year whatsoever. We'll be back on the other side of the break. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Being informed, the YouTube live stream is struggling a little bit today. Seems like an internet connectivity issue. Looks like it's back up now. Jaramani's letting me know. I apologize. I really don't have much of a way of knowing when that's happening outside of, I see Cynthia, Larry, a handful of others kind of letting me know. I do appreciate that very much. I apologize for the inconvenience. Not a lot that I can do about it. Seems like it is up and running now, though. So go ahead and take advantage of that if you haven't been already. Maybe subscribe to the channel. We're up over 100 subscribers. It's pretty exciting. So come join the party. We got a lot of fun things going on over there as well. It's literally just go in the search bar, type my name in, Ben Cominos. That channel will be the first thing that pops up there. Also available on Political Voices Network with a lot more bells and whistles at 1 p.m. too. And of course the WHBY app. Lots of ways to do this here, and it's a pretty exciting time to say the least. Okay, before I get into what I wanted to talk about, I did want to address Mickey here really quickly because she had messaged me this, and I meant to start the show off with it, but I have the attention span of most woodland creatures, so sometimes I forget to do these kind of things. In the local half hour, we're talking about Green Bay Area School District possibly cutting funds for the for the fine arts department. And Mickey, I think, does a great job of setting it up here. She goes, as far as the fine arts department is a perfect example. My brother was high end ADHD and he got into drama class because he needed something to do, keeping him busy, right? And one day he spotted the guys on a catwalk and he never looked back. It's now 20 years later. He's a successful business owner on the East Coast, putting on the special effects for things like MTV Red Carpet, Golden Globes, Victoria's Secret one-way shows. So yeah, fine arts are extremely important, and I couldn't stress that enough either. Not even from the perspective of you might end up doing something physically in the industry. The skills that you learn for life in terms of time management, in terms of collaboration, in terms of coordination, in whatever the situation may be, are unparalleled. And the idea that we might be losing the fine arts departments because of ROI in a state that has a multi-billion-dollar surplus and $700 million going to wealthy people that are kids in private schools. I think we can find a way to just keep the fine arts department thriving along just fine here, and it's a matter of Republicans getting out of the way. It's almost like there's a reason why so many of them are dropping out right now. Waka waka. Karen says Congress has had no say in the war anyway, in response to Brian's call. That's fair. And Michelle says in the Appleton No Kings protest, there were a number of community organizers and volunteers at the protest Saturday. Some have organized food drives, donation drives for a number of neighbors, most recently for local TSA workers. Yeah, Michelle's exactly right. And we had Emily Cephos, who's running for, she's just a private citizen right now, but she's running for State Senate District 19 against Rachel Cabral Guevara in November. She was on the program on Friday talking about an effort that she has started. There's a GoFundMe available that was pushing 10 grand on Friday. It was a little over 8,500 at the time, with a goal of 7,500 to try and raise a little bit of cash for these TSA workers until they can figure out a way to make ends meet. Again, it does look as though an executive order has finally been signed, and I hope every future president realizes that this has always been on the table, and you should probably just do this going forward instead of allowing games to be played with working class people's finances. And lastly, KG just says, at all the Houston protests, some of the local charities set up tents. You can donate to the food bank and exercise your First Amendment rights. Win-win. Yeah, I kind of figured that that was ultimately going to be the case because there's probably going to be a lot of like-minded people at these kind of things. So it would stand to reason that there would be a lot of people collecting on behalf of some of these shared interests. And Hal says, what would happen if they tried to cut the football program? You know, there's a 1998 movie called The Faculty, which is one of my favorites, which is basically Invasion of the Body Snatchers mixed with just the most 90s aesthetic you can possibly imagine. And that's quite literally the focal point of the opening chapter right before the principal ends up getting inhabited by the alien. And they're talking about cutting the school musical that year. And the musical director says, but I bet you the football team will get brand new jerseys this year, even though they got new jerseys last year. And the principal says, yeah, because it makes more money than anything in our entire county. So yeah, they're going to get new jerseys and new equipment and new all these other things, which brings up the question of ROI, return on investment. And does that phrase belong discussing education? I would argue in terms of dollars and cents, no. In terms of actual output, yeah, totally. Like, I would like to see performances go up, but as we've talked about 1,000 times over, that's a much more convoluted conversation than something a Republican or Democrat or a funding bill is going to be able to do. And until we have people interested in wanting to have serious talks about this, we're just going to have a lot of finger pointing back and forth. We need more money. No, you need less money. No, you don't get any of this. Like, it doesn't go anywhere because people are kind of dug in on whatever beliefs that they already have. It sucks. It sucks because, again, I don't know that I'm doing this with you guys right now if I hadn't done drama club. it's easy to forget because you do this job in a room where nobody can hear you. And I have a handful of people that interact with the show, but by and large, 99% of the people listening to this show never really interact with it in any kind of way. That can mess with you a little bit if you don't have experience performing otherwise. Like there's skills, there's traits that I learned doing drama club that I think are important. Hell, even just time management. I was a 15-year-old kid. You have to catch the bus at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be getting home at 9 p.m. at night, Monday through Friday, because of all the extracurriculars, a lot of which were drama club related. Two of three of which, Mondays through Fridays, were drama club related. So like it definitely teaches you time management, or in my case, you just learn not to do your homework and you just figure out how to get by. But whatever, you learn the skills you learn and you keep moving on. Definitely some food for thought here. It's a shame. It's a shame, nevertheless. All right, so I want to get into this economic conversation here. More of you guys are talking about the Appleton No King. All right, ADD. I know Jerry says, I know some people that attended Appleton No Kings. All of them do important volunteer work in the community. It's exactly right. And again, I find a lot of people don't brag about their volunteer work. I'll say it that way. Trust me, I take a lot of heat as a public facing figure that I do not publicize a lot of what I do. You'll notice I don't have any social media accounts of what was going on at the No Kings protest because I'm big on you should just do things to do them, not necessarily searching for the accolades and the roses and whatnot. But Jerry, you're exactly right as well. I guarantee you there's dozens of examples of what you all are talking about out there. All right. So with that, let's get into this here. I cut my teeth doing radio with you guys during the Biden years, talking about the shortcomings of economic equality. As a result of those shortcomings, the Democrats ended up losing all levers of power in Congress, and Republicans have turned around and used those levers of power to only drive the inequality further in this country. And we're going to back up that claim in just a second here. But as we've been highlighting, just since January of 2025, taxes have been cut for the wealthiest earners. Job numbers have been cut by the people who received a lot of those massive tax cuts. And we're not seeing wages go up in any kind of meaningful way. It's not a uniquely Trumpian problem, but as I predicted during the Biden years, a Democratic loss would at least wake liberals up to the fact that this economy is not working for us. Insert the actual PhD level economists waking up to something that a guy with an internet connection and a basic capacity for deductive reasoning has been telling you guys since the end of 2022.
I would feel incredibly different about the corporate income tax rate if we had universal paid sick days.
Yeah.
If the minimum wage
Yeah.
wasn't $7.25, if 100% of people had paid family leave, or if everyone got bereavement leave, or if we made more income, I would feel really, really different about the corporate income tax rate if they had ever proved that they spent it on workers. But they don't. The only time they spend it on workers is when we have a union that makes them do it. So they have had many decades to show that they would put a corporate income tax rate into a really good compensation package, and they would bite the bullet and take things like a minimum wage. But you will still have these corporations not only demand a lower corporate income tax rate, then say they can't have jobs if the minimum wage is above $7.50.
Yeah.
Cake, eating it. I don't know how that phrase works. That's corporate income taxes. No. And if you're like, I don't know, Catherine, even after shrinkflation, I still think I'm on big corporation side. I want to point out that corporate profits as a share, again, express all of the profits after tax corporate profits in the United States. So they've made their money, they've paid for all their expenses, they've paid their taxes. How much do they have left? Expressed as a share of GDP.
Okay, so we can track it over time.
Over the past 94 years, that number of corporate profits after tax as a share of GDP reached 8% once, and it was in 1929. Not a great year, frankly, to be associated with. For the past 4 years, they've been over 9%. So we are living in the era of the largest corporate profits in U.S. history every year for the past 4. So you know what? Tax them.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll leave. Tax them. It's so much money to leave on the table for what is getting harder and harder to defend is not just greed.
Man, for 4 years, it's been over 9%. Meanwhile, that's the profits of corporations as a relation to GDP. Only one time has it been over 8%, and that was in 1929. 4 years. Man, what year was 4 years ago? 2022. Wow. When did Outside the Box start and get harangued as being a conspiracy theorist for highlighting that all of our money was being funneled into the pockets of a handful of corporations that have been utilizing monopolization and a lackluster government in order to exploit us? But did you hear the Olympics isn't letting trans people something trans? So, like, who cares about the corporate greed? This, I think, is what's pushing me to the point of a complete mental breakdown, is that MAGA is exactly right. Corporate greed was impacted 4 years. That means 2024, 23, and 22. All of those are under Joe Biden, and as a result, we did not see things improve. We were funneling money to Ukraine while American services were still in a very gradual collapse. They win the House, they win the Senate, they win the presidency, and they have access to the Supreme Court, and they use that power to cut taxes and something trans, and we're supposed to pretend like they still mean business. I had a bit of a breakdown show right when I came back from Thailand the first week, where I just screamed at the top of my lungs 6 or 7 times, what is it that you people want? And like, I find myself in one of those moments today because I don't understand. During the Biden years, there was childcare fraud by the Somalis, which is why we should not allow immigration ever, because the Somalis are going to get all of your money. During the Biden years, those Somalis and their fraud ended up getting fined over $300 million. Then Stickly, the world's worst journalist, shows up and goes to close down childcare facilities and says, why are there no children here? Do you know how much penalties, how much assessment of fraud there has been with government tax dollars since Stickly's reporting in Minnesota? 0. So the Biden administration was actually holding these people to account, but not highlighting the identity of it. And then MAGA shows up with the identity of the people, does nothing about the actual fraud, and this is supposed to be viewed as an absolute win. Call me crazy, guys, but it seems to me that the entire point of Stickly's reporting is to get people on the side of maybe we just don't need the Somalis in this country, as opposed to highlighting that there is fraud everywhere in this nation. People are getting away with it everywhere simply by giving our sitting president $1 million and then walking away from it. What is it that you people want? Is it a strong white nation? Is that all that it is? Joseph Schwartz, he was convicted of healthcare fraud. ProPublica is reporting it. He owned nursing homes. He was sentenced to prison, and he had to pay a $39 million fine to the people that he took advantage of with his nursing home scheme. His mom gave Trump $1 million in the form of a donation, and Trump pardoned him. Not a single peep from the Hunter Biden crew. This is one example of dozens that I could get into. And again, I am fine living in a post-corruption America as long as the people that are engaging in corruption accidentally deliver for the American population every once in a while. I am not seeing that happen in this Trump presidency. I'm seeing no more trans people at the Olympics, wealth inequality at record levels still with no interest in addressing it, a war in Iran that our stupid president has no idea how to get us out of, and wanton fraud. And the only example of fraud that gets on MAGA's radar is fraud done by immigrants. But don't call them racist. They just are angry at the Somalis. 920-281-1150. MAGA, what do you want? What do you want out of this presidency? I would love an explanation as to what you actually want. Were you upset at the idea that immigrants were getting health care? Okay, great. Then you should be super pissed at the idea that the GOP is weighing cutting access to your health care to pay for the Iran war. Like, there comes a time when there is no consistency in what you are actually looking for. And as somebody trying to extend an olive branch, it kind of is breaking me in half a little bit because there's no consistency in your thought. And I really need to see that percolate through if we're going to have serious conversations going forward. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, it's Ben. Good morning.
Hey, what's up, Ben?
Don't sound too excited. I think, the consistency part needs to be more on an economic front by serious politicians on both sides that really mean what they say when it comes to wealth inequality and affordable housing and lower interest rates and all those things. I completely agree. And that will get people elected as long as they follow through in a system that is very broken. When it comes to, now this might be a little bit of a hard conversation.
Okay.
But under they were not giving the identities of Somalians, like you said, but they were giving the identity of every time a white person committed a crime against a person who is a minority. They were doing that. And if they're going to give the race or the gender and the race of somebody who commits a crime, then why aren't they doing that for everyone? And I think that's where a lot of people were starting to get upset. Like, why are you only covering this when it's a white person? Why are you only covering this, to paint whites and blacks apart from each other?
Do you have an example of that, Ben? Like, what economic fraud was enacted by white people that liberals ran up the flagpole?
I'm just talking about crimes in general. I'm talking about, whether it's shootings or, a white cop shot an unarmed black man or whatever. And the video was rolling halfway through, or they didn't know the backstory on it. And even if it was a wrong, unjustifiable shooting, it does happen where black people kill black people, or where black people kill white people. It does happen, or where there was transgender shooters at a school shooting, and it was not being covered. Like, why aren't you covering that? Not you.
Yeah.
I'm saying, why wouldn't, and it's not to hate on the trans people. I'm saying, if you're going to say a white person did it, then why aren't you saying the other elephant in the room as well when that happens? The consistency of it. And it did happen under the Biden administration. Now, it did maybe not with the fraud part of it. I'm sure there's plenty of white people out there that commit fraud. I know a couple people myself that have done it, that are white people. This isn't a uniquely minority problem.
Yeah.
I completely respect that. But I'm just saying, in order for people to, and like you're saying, I don't know why the government still shut down. And well, I can speculate. That people just don't want to vote for anything that the Trump administration is doing or proposing, because the 20% or whatever it is, that with the big microphones, the cancel culture people, and I think you talked about it last week on your show too, about I only listened to your show last Friday. I tried to get a week away from politics.
I dig it.
About bringing back comedy, and I think I posted something about it too, because I remember the left, not everybody, but the ones with the microphones, the ones that have the voices on TV, when absolutely their heads melted. When Kill Tony did his bit, I think it was at the RNC.
Yeah, Puerto
he said
Rico, something
something
about Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah, garbage or something, you know, where he was towing that line.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
But
and
yeah,
you're
he's a
exactly
widely-
right. You're exactly right, Ben. The only notes I have in terms of that aspect of what you were saying is it wasn't the left, it was liberals, and I'm right there with you. There was in my youth, it was conservatives were the wet blankets, and then from like 2010 to 2022, liberals usurped that role, and now you're kind of seeing a course correction again here. I get your point, and to even take it a step further, Ben, I do wish that the media reported on gun violence in general the way that they report on officer shootings. I realize there's an extra element there, and I got to let you go just because we're up against the time frame here. But I appreciate the perspective that you kind of provided in that conversation. I guess for me, it's a difference of, and we've kind of segued very far off of the point that I was trying to make here, but for me, there is an element of consistency that was missing during the Democratic Party, and it's always just so much more flagrant coming from the Trump movement. I think that's the biggest issue. Is Nancy Fraud engaging in stock market insider trading? Almost definitely. Is what Donald Trump's fraud is doing so much more in your face? Absolutely. I've got more thoughts about it. Unfortunately, we're pressed up against it here, so I have to get out of here. We have a whole other hour that we have to do, though, so stay where you are, and we'll be back in just a little bit. Outside the Box, Ben Comino's WHBY Political Voices. And we're back. Ben Comino's WHBY Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. If you're just joining us, we talked a little bit about the aftermath from No Kings, or lack thereof, I should say. Not a whole hell of a lot of fallout from what took place over the weekend, talking about the shutdown that ultimately ended up getting put down by Speaker Mike Johnson after some bipartisan efforts coming out of the Senate shortly after the show wrapped up on Friday. And then we wrapped up the show with a little bit of a what is it exactly that we are voting based on in politics these days. You know, I have been ingratiating myself. I don't know if that's the right word. I've been involved. No, that's not right either. I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for. I have been taking part in more right-wing podcasts lately because I don't believe Fox News has their finger on the pulse of what conservatives my age and younger, and even to a certain extent, maybe even a decade older than me, really expect out of the party. I watch Fox News for the purposes of this program, and I find that a large percentage of their programming these days is trying to get a certain generation of voters to sign on for yet another forever war in the Middle East while cutting social spending for their grandkids. I'll allow you guys to figure out which generation that might be. But you see a sentiment that Trump was viewed as the way out, a savior even, which is a strange thing to say. Rebuilding domestically, no more foreign wars, you know, build that wall. All the promises over the course of the past 10 years. And you see people reacting to that sentiment in a way saying that only idiots believed that Donald Trump represented that exit. And it's not that simple, in my opinion. And it kind of harkens back to what this show is all about. It is the Democratic Party's lack of interest in providing that vision that pushes people towards Donald Trump. We watched it happen in 2016. We watched it happen again in 2024. I'd argue the two Democratic victories of this millennium came as a result of candidates running as actual progressive change candidates, but then governing as centrist milquetoasts, resulting in enough frustration bubbling up from independents and from right-wing voters to bring Trump back into office again. I hinted at it on Friday, but you kind of watch it happen in real time with Hassan Piker. He is a far left, a self-described communist by nature who hosts a podcast. Gavin Newsom was more than comfortable going on with shows with Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk and all these different individuals who disagree with liberals from the right. But the second that a far leftist shows up and says, hey, explain to me what Democrats actually do that benefits the majority of the working class, that is viewed as going on a hateful, anti-Semitic podcast that Democrats should not be paying any concern to. It's one of the many frustrations of not having the goldfish memory that so many people have in the world of politics. Shortly after losing in 2024, the main call for Democrats was to find a progressive Joe Rogan, to find a Joe Rogan of the left that could bring young people over and show politicians in a light that isn't the sterilized perception that comes out of most mainstream sources. This individual is one of those options, and instead of embracing the opportunity, he is vilified, and vilified much more than your Steve Bannons, than your Charlie Kirks, which I get post-assassination. If you say something bad about Charlie Kirk, you get fired. But prior to the assassination, saying something bad about Charlie Kirk was pretty commonplace. But it didn't matter because it's okay to go on these kind of podcasts that shift right, but never to the left. And it goes to highlight the duopoly in politics right now. I made a post for my social media platforms, which you can go up and see right now. It's a 15-second video that I put up in regards to financial policies that financial penalties that were for some of the most egregious crimes of my adult life. Case in point, every major bank settled for the fraud that they perpetuated during the 2008 financial crisis. I'd argue the decision some of these people in banks made set my generation and the next generation, as well as kneecapping Gen Xers, all as a result of trying to get themselves more in a fiscally better position. In the aftermath of those crimes, Bank of America paid $56 billion. JP Morgan Chase paid $27 billion. Citigroup, $15.4. Wells Fargo, $10.9. Deutsche Bank, $10.5. Goldman Sachs, $8 billion. It all totals $321 billion in fraud payments coming from these banks that perpetuated one of the biggest economic crimes in modern American history. There were zero criminal charges against bank executives. And the worst part is that Democrats had a supermajority when this was happening. They had the opportunity to hold the rich and powerful to account and chose not to do so. Thankfully, MAGA and the drain the swamp attitude has been in charge now with a trifecta. So we're starting to see those criminal charges get filed against egregious behavior. Case in point, every bank that touched Epstein's money has settled. $290 million from JP Morgan. Deutsche Bank's at $75 million. Bank of America's at $72.5 million. A total of $437 million in settlements. Zero criminal charges against any banker that was involved in touching Epstein's money. Oh, never mind. I thought I was proving a point about how MAGA is doing better than Democrats. That's my bad. It's actually highlighting the two sides of the same coin nature about how these people are in power to protect some of the most powerful individuals on the planet without holding them to account. And to take you way back when I first started here, Ron the Swamp Johnson, senator for Wisconsin, would run ads on WHBY network highlighting that Mandela Barnes was for bail reform, and bail reform was going to let murderers and rapists back on the street because of liberal soft on crime policies that Republicans oftentimes like to harangue them for. And I would turn my mic on after those commercials would end, and I would say that's not what bail reform is. What bail reform is not allowing some of the worst people on the planet to be able to escape prison time just for having the financial means to be able to do so. And I would provide examples of people that had engaged in pretty violent actions over the course of the recent months in 2022, and then the bail that they were ultimately released on. And then I would ask hypothetical questions like, do you feel safer knowing that this man is on the streets because he had quick access to $50,000? And would you find him to be more of a threat to society if he only had access to $5,000? And if you understand the problems with that mentality, then you understand the basic concept of bail reform. You flash forward to today and you realize that that same principle is applied to the wealthiest people in this nation, whether it be for affiliations on the Epstein list or being involved in the 2008 financial crisis. The same principles hold true regardless. And regardless of which trifecta you have, and I use these examples because it highlights in 2008, Democratic trifecta, 2026, Republican trifecta. The outcomes are the same, and it's a matter of money. So in other words, affiliation with Epstein and the clientele is okay, unless you are broke, in which case then you might actually face some kind of criminal charges, maybe. But since everybody on that list is already well off, is already well connected, it seems as though we're just going to bury this. And yet somehow, and Lord knows I have no love lost for Hillary Clinton, somehow Hillary Clinton is one of the main focal points of these investigations right now, despite A, being a woman, and B, really not being affiliated with this list whatsoever, even in regards to the emails. It's almost like this is being prosecuted for political reasons with no real interest in addressing the problems that so many people have. But you know, what do I know? I'm just speculating here. But these are the kind of issues that people are voting for. And I've been reading up on cult behavior these days because I want to see how this is going to end. And I'm going to be real with you, based on what I've read thus far, it doesn't end pretty. Because clearly there are people struggling with the sunk cost fallacy, with pouring 10 years of your political identity into one man, in a slavish behavior, to be honest, because there are people in politics that I like, but the second one of them were found to be guilty of impropriety or realistically screwed me over in any way, I'm pretty quick to cut ties. As I stated, Anna asked me if I was a Scorpio, because I said, I don't care if you're related to me. I'll cut ties pretty quickly if you're acting like a jerk. It really doesn't bother me. MAGA won't bail. The party is shrinking, but the people who are still there, that's how you get North Korea style polling, where it says 100% of MAGA voters are on board with what Donald Trump is doing. It's because anybody with any self-respect right now is no longer identifying as MAGA. And by 2030, maybe 2031, most people who were 10 toes in on this individual are going to pretend like they never were. Right? It's like I often talk to you guys about. It's the plight of the progressive. It is the curse that progressives have to deal with, that we're right about stuff 10 years in advance. And then 10 years later, everybody comes to grips with what we were telling them and then pretends like they were there the entire time. And we just have to go along for the ride for reasons I'll never quite understand. But it's the same principle here. And whether you're talking about cost of health care, which Obamacare made better, most certainly exacerbated the problem as well. What have Republicans done to do anything about it? The answer is nothing. The answer is not a damn thing. The answer is stand around blaming Democrats and then propose no legislation to actually address the issue. Like, realistically, guys, I can, off the top of my head, rattle off a bunch of centrist ideas that the Biden administration had that solved the wealth inequality crisis by 0.3%. We are at almost 16 months of Donald Trump. We got a tax cut for billionaires, and what's the second thing? What's the second thing that's happening that's supposed to make life more affordable for America? And again, not that tax cuts will make life more affordable for America, but just out of curiosity, What's a second example? 920-281-1150. Assuming I buy into the idea, and based on the tax returns that have been filed thus far, it seems as though 80% of the bottom 80% of Americans, when you assess how much more they're going to make on average an extra $953 over the course of a year as a result of those tax cuts. I'm interested how much more they pay for gas every week. I'm interested what's happening to their healthcare premiums. I'm interested how far $953 go when we continue allowing 7 companies to continue gouging us at record levels. And if you weren't listening in the 9 o'clock hour, for 4 straight years, over 9% of America's GDP is accounted for by corporate profits. After taxes, after costs of business, after everything, 9% of GDP is corporate profits. The only time it ever was over 8% was in 1929, and we have been dealing with over 9% since 2022. What has the Trump administration done? Because we can't hold Democrats to account until the Republicans stop sucking. There's no less flagrant way for me to say it other than that. The only way to hold Democrats to account is if what the Republicans are offering isn't blatantly worse. Case in point, it is objectively atrocious politics to float the idea, let alone passing it, to float the idea of cutting healthcare subsidies further for Americans in the name of finding $200 billion to fund an Iran war that anybody outside of the diest of diehard MAGAs support. It is objectively stupid person politics. But when the Republican Party is running on, and then Gavin Newsom shows up and says, remember what life was like in 2024? Yeah, we'll just keep doing that. Guess what's going to win in those two conversations? And then inevitably, smug MAGAs will call this show and say, Ben, I thought blah, 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 blah about the Democrats, and yet here they are doing the things you said are awful. I'm like, I know. It's almost like having a second party that offers no material benefits to the working class is going to get trounced by this until people forget just how bad they are at governing. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Morning, Ben. Jerry from Appleton.
Hey, Jerry.
So I've been following politics longer than you have, I think.
Sure.
Well, I know because I started before you were born. I want to give some historical context that you may have heard about, but probably aren't fully aware. So the reason why the Republicans are investigating Hillary Clinton in connection with Epstein, which seems to be absurd. So it goes back to roughly 2003. I can't put an exact date on it. But what is now the MAGA crowd before the emergence of Trump as a politician, one of their main issues, if not their main theme, was it almost like they thought that Hillary Clinton was the devil. I'll give you an example, but it's a representative example of a movement. I have a second cousin who I used to follow on Facebook, but I had to unfollow him because he was driving me crazy. Around 2005 to 2010, literally every single day, he would make a Facebook post bashing Hillary Clinton, and most of them were just made up nonsense that he was reposting from some places. So this was like a constant drumbeat for years. Hillary Clinton this, Hillary Clinton that. Some of it might have been tangentially based in truth, but generally speaking, it was all a bunch of made up crap. So with that context, of course, they're going to try to link Hillary Clinton to Epstein.
Yeah, I mean, I can't refute anything you're saying. It does feel like red meat designed to not actually get answers, but just satiate. There's people in my family, and you might know the phrase I'm going to say here, Jerry, but when Clinton was in office in the 90s, I guess Hillary, there was a question about how active she's been on the political scene while her husband was president, to which her response was, what am I going to do? Stay home and make cookies? Which, let's just say there's people in the Cominos family, extended family, I should say, that still reference that line from the 90s, pretending that it is somehow vilifying people that stay home and raise a family, as opposed to highlighting that women have a capacity to do just as much as men can. And for that line to live rent-free in someone's head for 30 years, that is so innocuous, so forward thinking for the time period that it was said, it kind of goes to highlight the exact kind of political animosity that you're describing there. So I'm fairly certain you're probably accurate in your assessment there.
And by the way, in the 2016 election, I'm not saying this was fair, but Hillary Clinton was probably the least popular person the Democrats possibly could have nominated.
Yeah.
And so if they would have nominated somebody without all that baggage, that person, in my opinion, would probably have won the 2016 election.
If only there had been another person in that primary who hadn't been kneecapped at every turn. I appreciate the call.
If only the smoke-filled room people didn't anoint Hillary at the beginning of the process because it was "quote unquote" her turn.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I appreciate the call. You take it easy. And I mean, realistically, to Jerry's point, and I'm going to tangent now, they haven't learned a damn thing. You watch the Democrats in office right now trying to kneecap Graham Plattner, who's polling 55 to like 28 last I saw. I don't remember. I'm making up I know he's at 55. Janet Mills is somewhere in the 20s. He's beaten the conservative candidate by 9 points, whereas Janet Mills is tied with Susan Collins. And the backroom Democrats, the Chuck Schumers of the world, they still would rather throw their weight behind Janet Mills and lose rather than allowing a progressive candidate to win. And I'm going to keep banging this drum the closer we get to election time. I believe in 2 weekends, I'm going to be speaking at a Green Party event about the importance of third parties. And I count myself as somebody who identifies as what people refer to as Democrats, but is most certainly not a Democrat. And to Jerry's point, this idea of waiting your turn or it being somebody's time to run, don't be ridiculous. That can't be the way that it works. It's almost like within the Democratic establishment, the idea that an elected official has to actually earn votes, even when the alternate is so objectively trash. I'll never understand. Like, literally just come out and say you're going to tax billionaires and do Medicare for all and walk away with 65% of the vote. But they won't do that. They'd rather convince you, and we got to cut taxes and eliminate some of the red tape so that big corporations can do more things at a cheaper price. Here's a fun fact. Since baseball season has started off, there's a video going viral, and they actually already had these machines in place at Wrigley last year. And I know that because I ordered from one back in August. It's a giant touch screen for you to be able to order drinks, and then it pours it for you. It does all the things. At no point do you ever actually interact with a human being while ordering a beer from that machine. The beer is still $20, of course, which billionaires always told me we have to keep the minimum wage low, otherwise they would have to raise the cost of things. So now that Dodgers Stadium no longer has people serving drinks anymore, I'm assuming that $20 price tag for a can of Mick Ultra is probably going to go back down to something a little bit more accessible, right? Right? Oh, right. That's right. It was just a bunch of horse crap. So Democrats could run on addressing this. They could run on addressing this kind of thing, or they can lose. And to Jerry's point, it's the my turn attitude. And I realize that's not where his call started, but it's where I'm taking it. And it's an infuriating prospect to kind of cling to there, because the my turn candidate, in quotes there, very rarely actually has good ideas. They expect to just be anointed and bank on the orange man being so uniquely bad that enough people will show up. And for the record, there's a 50-50 chance they're right, because there's only 2 candidates. So they really have no reason to lose or reason to change. The worst part about the Trump administration is that Democrats are going to beat the crap out of Republicans in 2026 and learn no lessons about 2024. Objectively, that is the worst part of the Trump administration, is that it is allowing for Democrats to win. It's gonna be ugly. Like, I'm just gonna be real. Republicans will cry voter fraud. There will be no evidence of voter fraud. It's going to be the trash way in which they had governed for the last 2 years, resulting in the outcome that they're going to need to deal with in November. And Democrats will learn nothing. Blue MAGA will still be Blue MAGA, because that's how uniquely bad this is being portrayed. And the worst part is, and I'm already anticipating it, we will still be in conflict in Iran when Democrats take the White House back in 2028, and they will have excuses as to why we can't pull out, and they will blame Trump. And the blame will be accurate, but we will still continue funding that conflict. That is where this is ultimately headed, and I'm going to scream when we get there. I've got a lot more to do, but let's squeeze a break in now. 920-281-1150 for anybody that wants to chime in here. Or, of course, you can jump on the YouTube stream as well. We got a couple of people there. Seems like it is up and running. Jeremiah says, her turn, in quotes, are the exact words that came out of one of my elder family members. Oh, there's plenty of people that feel that way. I had a family member trying to convince me that Kamala Harris being anointed on the top of the ticket was actually the best example of democracy that he could think of. It's out there. Blue MAGA's as much of a cult as regular MAGA. They're just not as loud or obnoxious as MAGA is. It's basically the difference. Quick break. We'll be back. Ben Cominos, Outside the Box, WHBY, and Political Voices Network. All right, and we're back. Outside the Box, Ben Cominos, WHBY. Mallory texted just as I was getting back, and this is an appealing way to start a conversation. She's out in Oshkosh. For anyone considering running for office, they should just do it. As long as you are dedicated to doing the work, put your hat in the ring, and don't feel like you have to align with a party. One way to break the two-party system is to get more independents involved, especially in local nonpartisan elections. We have to stop defaulting to the vote blue or red mindset. I tell folks all the time, vote for the candidate, not the party. Yeah, there's one state, I can't remember even which one it was, that's moving to remove party affiliation even from the partisan elections, because I do believe there's a lot of people who really don't stay particularly informed. Like, I'm willing to bet there's probably a larger percentage of people in the Fox Valley right now catching up on the Brewers sweep over the weekend and looking back at that Duke and UConn game and how that ended, much more so than they're following along with, Wisconsin school board elections taking place in just 8 days here. I think that's a very fair point. Hell, I've had several people reach out to me and ask about running, and I am personally, I would love to get involved in the process, but then I'd have to abandon this gig, and I just started doing this. Much rather facilitate as many of you guys as I can here going forward. But I think you bring up a valid point there, Mallory, that I think is worth highlighting there, especially on the local front, because you have the capacity to impact our community in whatever small way you can be able to do so. So I've stated it before, and I'll state it again. I'd like to see more people from the outside the box community getting involved electorally. I even was talking with some people about one particular position, but I have more thoughts on that later if it flushes out here. But there's one type of election that I think goes pretty underserviced in the world of electoral politics that I think is pretty interesting when you stop and look at the type of people who run for it. But I have to go quickly here just because we do have to squeeze one more segment in after this before. But I do want to at least kind of put a bow on the conversation that I was talking about. The Atlantic has an article right now about the brain drain in America, and this kind of highlights what I spent the better part of the first segment in this hour talking about, and we'll get this call on in a second, but I want to read this excerpt first from the Atlantic. It says, while all of this has been unfolding, meta scientists have been following a very different story overseas. They've watched in wonder as China has built out a gigantic research apparatus at world record speed, stocking institutions, universities, and laboratories with talent and some of the best equipment and facilities money can buy. In 1991, China spent $13 billion on research and development. Today, its annual spending is more than $800 billion, second only to the U.S. The Chinese government just unveiled a plan to grow the country's science budget by 7% each year for the next 5 years. According to a new forecast from Nature, China's public spending on research is likely to overtake the United States by 2029. Meanwhile, we are cutting funding for transgenic mice studies because it has trans in it. It's not even transgender. We just had a Nazi saluting moron in charge of government efficiency for a while. We're cutting Alzheimer's research. We're cutting cancer research while facilitating $200 billion into blowing up schools in Iran and making sure that Elon Musk can become a trillionaire at an even faster rate than the pace that he was already on. This brain drain will not have immediate impacts on us. You will not notice this overnight, but there is something in the wind. And moreover, if I'm a scientist, if I'm one of the best at what I do, I would be pretty nervous about working in America also, because I'd be one presidency away from my study all of a sudden being determined to be DEI because I was working with a woman at one point, or because it focused in any way on a black person. And so I lose all my funding. I'd probably just go to a place that isn't governed by a bunch of petulant children. I don't blame them for a second for leaving to go to other places, and we will feel the impact of this over time. I remember my uncle, one of my uncles is one of the country's leading experts in searching for a cure for Alzheimer's. He entered a competition at Stanford with 400 other people focusing on his line of work, and he ended up getting the opportunity to work in that lab over the other 399 people. I'd be interested in 10 years, were the same opportunity to present itself again, would we see that kind of interest working in America when you don't know from day to day whether or not you're going to be deemed woke? It's a strange time to be alive. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, amen to what all you just said, but I just want to say you cannot leave the radio station because, believe it or not, you can do a whole lot more education and a whole lot more good coming over the airwaves and being a legislator.
Well, I appreciate that. You're not the first person to tell me that either, but I appreciate it nevertheless. But yeah, I get it. I get it. And this show's all about kind of changing minds, getting us all kind of rowing the boat in the same direction here, which you never know. Down the line, maybe, but I'm not even 5 years into this. I'd like to see how far we could take this. But nevertheless, and as Ben says, no Corona beer because of the coronavirus. Exactly. We're lost. We're lost in a lot of ways here. That it's going to take a while for us to undo, because again, it's not like President Newsom is going to fix this problem, because President Vance is right around the corner who might end up cutting this kind of stuff again. And it's worth acknowledging the reason we've been at the forefront of all these different developments is because some of the brightest and most technologically advanced people have been willing to come here and do these kind of things. Losing that, I think, is probably universally accepted as a net negative, unless, of course, we'd rather get a less intelligent white person to do the science for us. I guess we could consider that. I took a lot of those classes. I could maybe do it. We got to squeeze one more quick break in here before we call it a program today. Anybody else wants to chime in? 920-281-1150, 920-281 1150. We'll be back in just a little bit to put a bow on this program. So everybody stay right where you are. Quick break here. We'll be back. Outside the Box, Ben Cominos, WHBY and Political Voices Network. Oh, hey, welcome back. Glad you stuck through that with me. It's a strange time to be alive. I'll just leave that right where it is. Yeah, we've only got a couple of minutes left here, but should be more than enough time for me to make the point that I want to make about what's going on here. And it kind of ties into Mallory's point that she made there. about red or blue, about running independently, running for local office, so many other factors. Right now, as we've talked about on this show before, we have 2 hospitals in northern Wisconsin that are closing, thus creating hospital deserts in our little neck of the woods. While we shouldn't have to deal with this, again, multi-billion-dollar surplus. While we shouldn't have to deal with this, we are by no means unique or somehow standing out from the pack in regards to not having the guaranteed access to health care that so many other people around the world seem to have figured out a way to do it. The Daily Note is reporting that the average cost per day for a hospital stay in America is $11,700 a day. In Germany, it's $400. In Japan, it is $250. Same doctors, same equipment. Science does not change on a location by location basis. The only thing that is different are the priorities of the country and the system in which we administer healthcare. We're talking about a difference of $400 a day in Germany to $11,700 a day here in America. Even if you actually do subscribe to the idea that our healthcare is just so star-spangled awesome that we need to pay exorbitant amounts because that's how much healthier we are. I think that's a line of BS, but at the same time, if you want to believe that, that's fine. Are you actually going to sit there and try and convince me it's almost 30 times better than what goes on in Germany with an economy pretty comparable to what America's doing? Is that going to be your assessment? Because we only have a shade under 4 minutes left, so you're not going to be able to prove your point today. But why don't you hit me up in the emails? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a reason why I bring up hospital deserts. In Texas, 60% of counties do not have access to a pharmacy. 4.3 million Texans live in what is referred to as a pharmacy desert, just like how we have hospital deserts. Doesn't mean that there's no pharmacies in the state. It means that you're driving an hour, maybe more, in order to get to where you need to go. As efforts have been made, even in red states, I know Ohio is one major opportunity, or one state where there's an opportunity to do this. There has been an effort to break up pharmaceutical benefits managers. And as a result of doing that, and we can get into that more on another day, CVS has threatened to pull every CVS pharmacy out of Ohio in the name of not being allowed to make all of the money, just making most of the money. And you can prevent this because, again, healthcare should not be a business. It's a thing we do to make sure that we don't die prematurely. It's kind of the whole point to life, is making life more comfortable for the generations that come after us. There is an opportunity to do something about this. And it goes to highlight when we get angry and when we don't. Because I will be the first one to tell you guys that you show me a state governed entirely by blue politicians, and I will show you a state where the cost of living has shot through the roof. Homelessness is a very obvious problem, and there's enough red tape to strangle any type of development that might be beneficial for the working class. There are things to be desired in blue states that MAGA does not struggle to notice. This is taking place in Texas. This has nothing to do with blue MAGA or liberals. This has to do with a conservative party not interested in addressing healthcare concerns. Much like the Wisconsin GOP did everything in their power to prevent expanding access to Badger care to a larger percentage of Wisconsinites, even though we would not see any draining of our state funds. It would all come from federal dollars. There would come a time when maybe we might have people that highlight maybe the all red state and the anti-healthcare approach isn't necessarily what I'm looking for either. Again, you don't want the Mexicans because they're getting our free healthcare. Okay, fine. That claim only is viable if you actually want healthcare to go to Americans. If you don't, then shut up and let the adults in the room do the governing, because it seems like you're just trying to find reasons to complain about Mexicans if that's the case. So that's what's going on in Texas right now. Anna says crunchy moms who vote Republican claim healthcare is better in Europe and Japan. Do you mean like actual caring for yourself or healthcare? Because either way, that's an interesting point, nevertheless. And Ken says same thing with IVF in the U.S. We pay 30 to 35,000 in Thailand. You pay anywhere from 12 to 15. You have better care in Thailand than you do in the United States. Pick your poison, guys. I mean, that's very accurate. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. It's cheaper to book a flight to Mexico and get care done in Mexico than it is to just do it in your hometown. That should probably be something we vote on. But did you hear Democrats are coming to trans your kids? Download the WHBY app. All you have to do is search WHBY in Google Play or in the App Store, free and easy to use. Also, check us out on YouTube. Just search at Ben Cominos, and the channel will pop up right there. And, of course, we will be available on Political Voices Network right at 1 p.m. with some fancy bells and whistles there as well. I have to go. Nancy Mickey's in for Haley. That's up next. You're listening to Outside the Box here on WHBY.